Graham, sometimes you know what you know, sometimes you don't know what you don't know, sometimes what you do know isn't really factual, and sometimes everything you know is wrong, as the Firesign Theater like to say.
You know that you're wrong, but you fear you're right. You suspect you're out of sync. You think that you're out of your mind. Everything you know is wrong.
Is everything you know wrong about cancer? Suzanne Somers set out to find out. She's got a new book out, Interviews with Doctors Who Are Curing Cancer and How to Prevent Getting It in the First Place. The title of the book, Knockout. Suzanne Somers, welcome back to our show.
Thank you. So nice to be back.
Thank you. So it's nice to have you here. You're talking recently about your good and recently deceased friend Farrah Fawcett, who recently died of cancer, and you suggested to her that she go to a German clinic where they performed a test that's apparently available in the United States to determine whether chemotherapy will work. Tell us about this.
Well, actually, she called me a year ago and asked me if I knew anything about German medicine. I said yes, and I told her about that clinic. So it was her wanting to go there. Mm-hmm. But when she got over there, they did a chemosensitivity test, which I did not even know existed, and they found that the 3 grueling rounds of chemotherapy she had in this country was completely ineffective. And it made me start thinking about, why, when anybody is getting chemotherapy, why aren't there chemosensitivity tests done?
Right.
And in Knockout, I asked Ralph Moss, who's an esteemed science writer, and he's written several books and one of them questioning chemotherapy. And I said, why aren't we routinely having chemosensitivity tests? If we're going to take something that drastic, why wouldn't we want to know if it's a perfect fit? And he said, I'm just the messenger. He said, it's too much work. I said, what do you mean too much work? He said, well, they got to line up many, many, many Petri dishes. They got to put the blood in every Petri dish. Then they got to find every possible configuration and combination of chemicals or chemo to see which one responds. And he said it takes a few weeks, and it's very time-consuming. And so we have just chosen this country not to do them.
Yikes.
Yeah, it sure would be yikes if you're a patient having chemotherapy.
You betcha.
It's a big yikes.
You betcha. You point out in the book cancer is a $200 billion a year industry in the United States. I seem to remember from some years back, I had a friend who was a physician who was telling me about this, but this was well over a decade ago, that the only kind of doctors in America who legally could sell the same drugs that they were prescribing, which had been prohibited because you don't want doctors making a profit off selling drugs that they prescribe routinely, because then they would be encouraged to set up their own pharmacies and overprescribe their own drugs, that the only kind of doctor who could actually sell the drugs they were prescribing were oncologists, cancer doctors. And therefore, a lot of people in oncology were making millions of dollars a year, a lot of these oncology docs, not from being docs, but basically from being pharmacists. And the way that they were able to sell it was because they were actually responsible for delivering it. Somebody had to stick the needle into the arm to deliver it. Is that still the case?
That is still the case. They buy it retail. They buy it wholesale and sell it retail. And it makes you wonder: is there an agenda?
Yeah. It makes you wonder. Maybe this is why they're not using chemosensitivity tests.
Right. Because what if they did use the chemosensitivity test and found that, it wasn't effective for this particular kind of cancer?
Right, and then they can't afford to put the pool in the backyard this year.
Yeah, so what really is disturbing to me is there are cancers that respond to chemo, as you and I know. Testicular cancer, like Lance Armstrong, childhood leukemia, some lymphomas, including non-Hodgkin's. If I had one of those 3 cancers, I would entertain chemotherapy, although knowing myself, I most likely would do even those, go alternative, because that's my nature, my choice, so what I do for myself. But I'm getting attacked by, the National Cancer Society, and saying Dr. Otis Brawley said in an AP article yesterday, I'm afraid with Suzanne Somers being out there that people are not going to get the treatment that they need. And so I thought about that statement, and I thought, if you could tell us for solid tumor cancers, outside of these 3 I just mentioned, that you could cure me, if I take this harsh body-degrading treatment, can you cure me? And they cannot say yes. And so they keep talking about the progress, and I'm saying, what progress? The death rate has only dropped by 5% in 55 years. Even the New York Times has declared the war on cancer a dismal failure.
Yeah, this was yesterday.
Yes.
I'm assuming you're talking about yesterday's article,
yes,
where they said that the PSA test has not in any way decreased death from prostate cancer by men, and that they're thinking that an awful lot of breast cancers and prostate cancers that are being, quote, detected and cured, it's a lot of it's unnecessary effort on our part.
Yes, well, in Europe, if a man has prostate cancer, they pretty much leave it alone, and when they do treat it, they give them testosterone because, if you start thinking about hormonal decline, women and men start getting their breast cancers and prostate cancers as they decline in hormones. So the ducts in the prostate are like the ducts in a breast, and that's where the testosterone makes food for the sperm. So without the testosterone, that prostate enlarges. Put the testosterone back in, and then the prostate goes back to normal size because it has what it wants. We're trying to outthink nature and not think about what does the body want. I asked Dr. Nick Gonzalez, who's one of the doctors in my book who treats cancer nutritionally and has had great success. He's following a program that was originated by Dr. Kelly, Kelley. And he said, you give cancer what it wants, and it'll leave you alone. I said, what do you mean? He said, I said, what does it want? And he said, it wants nutrition. It wants a body that is clean of toxins, detoxed. And so he has a very controversial nutritional program that involves organic food, pancreatic enzymes, in a lot of them in the initial stages, like anywhere from 100 to 300 a day, because enzymes are like little Pac-Men that eat cancer, and he does liver flushes. They have to drink olive oil and gallbladder flushes and coffee enemas. So, they'd like to attack somebody like Dr. Gonzalez, but I asked him the other day before we went on Larry King, I said, can you send me 10 names of 10 stage 4 pancreatic cancer patients who've been on your protocol longer than 10 years? Half hour later, I got 10 names plus their phone numbers, and he said the reason it took so long to get back to you is I had to call them to make sure it was okay that you had their phone number. I don't know many oncologists who could whip out 10 long-term pancreatic cancer survivors on the present protocol, which gives people at most 5 years with a 99.8% death rate and a horribly degraded one on.
Yeah, somebody should have told Michael Landon.
And I think he went to alternatives late, but a lot of the doctors said, if we could get them before they get all radiated and chemoed up and give the alternative way a real shot. He said, but Dr. Gonzalez and also Dr. Brzezinski both said by the time people come to them, they're usually at death's door, and he said, then it's all uphill. We got to build them up nutritionally and hope that we beat the clock. He said, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't.
Yeah, I have a friend in Michigan, Don Hoy, who runs the Creative Health Institute there in Coldwater, and they've been doing Ann Wigmore's program for 30 years. And he said, we get about a miracle a week. I mean, I've known Don for years. Louise and I have been there many times, and we grew up in that area with him. And it's just amazing the work that they're doing with nutritional therapies, with wheatgrass juice and things like some of the things that you were just describing.
Right. These doctors are afraid to be too vocal because they get attacked. The FDA goes after them. Yeah. Dr. Brzezinski in Houston, the FDA tried to put him in jail for 300 years, and every time I talk about him on television, the interviewer will say, well, he's very controversial. He's been indicted, and I always have to say, and acquitted. He fought the government and won, and, you can indict a ham sandwich. So let's not make him guilty because of an indictment.
We're talking with Suzanne Somers, her new book, Knockout, Interviews with Doctors Who Are Curing Cancer and How to Prevent Getting It in the First Place. Suzanne, up till now, you and I have been discussing mostly how to treat cancers.
Right.
How do we avoid getting them in the first place, which seems like always the most desirable thing?
Right. Well, I asked Dr. Brzezinski the question. I said, how do we get cancer?
And we have about a minute, by the way.
Okay, so it's very simple. He said, we all have cancer in us, and we all have cancer protective genes that are like light switches that are turned on. They get turned off by diet and lifestyle habits. And I said, like what? And he said, you turn them off with chemicals and toxins in your house and food. You turn them off with bad food choices. You turn them off with poor sleep, and that's sleeping pill-induced sleep. And you turn them off with high stress. And you turn them off with imbalanced hormones. And I said, that's pretty much everybody. He said, well, you've got all those turned off. it's very likely you'll be one of the ones that gets cancer, but you can turn them all back on by reversing that.
So natural sleep, good natural foods.
So balance your hormones with bioidentical hormones. Manage your stress. Learn to sleep naturally with, if you need help, melatonin and GABA, which are natural serotonin inducers. Eat organic food and get the chemicals out of your life, out of your house. Go green in that sense, so that it's about saving your life.
Yeah, although it's a tough one, where every American has over 100 carcinogens measurable in their bloodstreams. It's a tough one.
Every little bit you do to get rid of chemicals is a step in the right direction.
It all helps. Knockout is the new book. It's just hitting the stands right now. Interviews with doctors who are curing cancer and how to prevent getting it in the first place. Suzanne Somers. Suzanne, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
Always great talking with you. Up next, Talk Radio News, our Washington Bureau, and your calls.